Call to order for the Watertown Special Council session for October 24th, 2022. Please rise while Councilman Schutte leads us in prayer.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this new day to gather with the responsibilities you've given us in this room. There's many responsibilities, Lord. There's many gifts, many abilities that you've bestowed on each one of us individually. And now we gather together in this room to help lead a city, to help manage a city, to help keep a city safe, Lord, and for this community, Lord, to grow together and unify. So I pray unity in the city hall, in every entity of this city, that we would unify, and may it spread into this entire community and region, Lord. And so this afternoon, when we go over the financial matters of the city, give us the wisdom and the direction to navigate appropriately, and that you be glorified in this process. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Finance Officer Bob Zine, would you please call the roll?
Okay, Bueller. Here. Danforth.
I'm here.
Holneed.
Here.
Paulson. Schutte.
Here.
Tupper.
Here.
Billhauer.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Quorum is established. I will now open a section of public comments. If anyone is here who would like to speak to the council about something that is not on today's agenda, now is your time to do so. I will close the public comments. Chair will accept a motion to approve today's agenda. Motion made by Councilman Schutte, seconded by Councilman Tupper. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting the agenda say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Item A on today's agenda is a review and public hearing of the 2023 manager's proposed budget. City Manager Mack, you have a slide presentation for us. Do you have any instructions on how you'd like to handle this? Do you want questions to wait till the end, or?
I think it may be better to answer questions as they come up. That way we don't forget them at the end. It should be a rather quick presentation, and if there are things at the end that we haven't covered, we're happy to do so.
All right, we'll take it away.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. We're here to present the 2023 proposed budget. Before doing so, I'd just like to share a couple of thoughts. First, I'd like to give a special thanks to Kristen and her team in the Finance Office for all of their work in putting this together. It's never an easy feat. All of the department heads and division managers who have spent quite a bit of time working through their numbers and making sure that the requests not only meet the needs but are appropriate and are well within our abilities to do that. A couple of thoughts about the budget this year seemed a little challenging. And I think there's some things in front of us that we all knew were coming. Inflation is one of them as we look at rising costs of fuel, equipment, wages, insurance, things like that. If you remember the 2022 budget, we did have federal dollars that we used to help supplement some of our payroll costs last year. Those were not available to us this year. Also, while the ice arena is currently under construction, that's a large project that is not completed and may potentially have some unknowns. And we also have the street maintenance facility and the City Hall projects that continue to loom until we make some decisions and determine how we're going to move forward. So all of those factors went into how we prepared the budget that we're about to present to you. We tried to be as conservative as we could, while also holding back what we think are appropriate unrestricted cash balances, so that if we do need additional dollars for any of those projects or equipment in the future, for example, we have that available to us. So with that, I will kick it off. Oh, and thank you to Lindsay and Kim for putting this presentation together. I am not technologically savvy, and it would have looked really bad if they hadn't done it. So here we go. All right, here are some of the budget priorities that we looked at when putting this together. So continuing to address wages to keep up with growing inflation through successful negotiations and position modifications. We'll talk a little bit about some additional positions that we're recommending, as well as some changes in current positions to bring them more in line with the market. implementation of our strategic plan and our master park plan, investing in efficiencies through software and technology, and wrapping up the Ice Arena, City Hall, and street maintenance facility projects. All right, so the general fund, here's just a nice little graph that shows that about 60% of our budget in the general fund is related to personnel. That's not unique to Watertown. Most cities see that a large portion of their budgets are personnel related. Some personnel requests. So you'll see on the left-hand side, these are requests that were submitted, and on the right-hand side are requests that have made their way into the budget. So we had 2 street operators, 2 park maintenance, 1 ice arena superintendent, an office specialist at the golf course, a fiscal specialist at the zoo, and 1 request that came through a council member, a lake coordinator position, and we can dive into that a little further. If you recall, Roger Foote retired this April, and we did not budget any dollars past April for that position. And as things have changed with the Upper Big Sioux watershed project, we think this is an opportunity to continue to do some of the lake work that Roger was doing, as well as enhance our stormwater work that we're required to do. So we're recommending in 2023, 1 street operator, 1 forestry position, the ice arena superintendent, which you all discussed a few weeks ago, and we are recommending the engineering tech, who really is the lake coordinator. That's just the appropriate title. We do have, this number is incorrect. It's $35,000 has been committed by the Lake Compesca Water District, and $23,000 annually from our stormwater program. We currently outsource some of that work, so we would bring that in-house. So there's a net of about $30,000 that would impact the general fund.
City Manager Mack, we have a question from Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Manager Mack, I'm the council member that made that request, so I'll take full blame and responsibility or credit, whichever the case may be. But I am glad to see this position in there. Roger, even though he was not doing the Upper Big Sioux work like the government wanted him to be doing the last several years, he was providing a valuable service to the lake and ultimately to the entire community. Questionably or, arguably, that is our most valuable asset within the community. And I'm glad to see that we are spending some attention. And also want to thank the Lake Compesca Water Project District people for supporting this as well. As I also understand it, we will also get benefit out of this position with some help in the engineering office as well. Is that a correct statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so the engineering tech piece of that, and Heath or Justin, I don't know where they're at, can probably speak more eloquently to that, the work. The stormwater work that we're contracting out is largely around education, around good stormwater practices, so that, like I said, would be brought in-house. That would be part of this role.
Okay. Anyway, again, thank you for including that as a recommendation in the budget.
I would also like to say I'm glad to see that position in there. We have a question from Councilman Danforth, then Councilman Bueller. Councilman Danforth?
Thank you, Mayor. Amanda, in looking at the personnel requests versus those that are being recommended, it seems like every year we always see that. But what's the downside? What's the downside of us not fulfilling the personnel requests? For example, you got 2 street operators, we're going with 1. So as we look at that, what's the downside that we have to look at from this side as to quality of service, timeliness of service, whatever that is?
That's a good question. One point of clarity I'd like to make, and it just got missed on this slide, is that we did have 2 requests for firefighters EMS. So those were not recommended this year. So the downside of not granting all of those requests is largely related to operations, how we respond to the growing workloads. Fire and EMS, it correlates to response times. Our park maintenance, as we know, our parks need some attention, and sometimes you just need boots on the ground. But we tried to really balance the current needs and and the budget that we had available. I think if we factored in, and Kristen can chime in if I get the number wrong, if we added all positions that were requested, it was about a $700,000 hit to the general fund, which may not seem like a lot, but that's an ongoing annual cost. Our health insurance, we budgeted a 12% increase into health insurance. We're looking at 5 to 7% for wages. It just wasn't feasible it wasn't responsible to ask for all of those positions to be filled in '23.
Any follow-up, Councilman? Councilman Bueller.
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager Mack, a couple of questions. We've had several discussions here in the last year or so regarding a possibility of putting on a marketing coordinator. I'm not sure that's the right term, but somebody that would serve in that capacity. I don't see that on this list, and then I have one additional question, and that is the forestry position. Just to clarify, is that for replacement for John Livermore? Or is this an additional one?
This is an additional position. We have hired John's replacement. He starts November 1st. I did not include the marketing position for a couple of reasons. One, we have had collectively as a group through our strategic planning conversations about marketing. I don't think we've really determined what that role is or should look like. Maybe those are duties that need to be reassigned somewhere. Maybe it is a whole new position. But we also don't have a job description or costs associated with that yet. I think that's a conversation that as we wrap up our strategic planning later this week and start diving into what does that actually look like, we can add positions mid-year like we did with the Wellness Center. I just didn't think we were quite ready for a full recommendation yet.
And then just a caution, and this goes to our Park and Rec department because they're part of that forestry division. We've had discussions also about this grapple saw and the usage that we're getting out of that. So just hopefully we have enough personnel so that we can put that to use and keep that going. My understanding is we've got a really big backlog of trees that need to be cut in the community. I'm sure that's going to just escalate.
Yeah. You're not wrong. We do have a pretty decent backlog. The individual that we're bringing on board as our new forester has quite a number of years of experience in managing forestry divisions. He's coming to us from the city of Brookings as well. So I trust that between him and Dusty, our new Park and Rec director, and their experience and leadership, will be able to tackle that appropriately.
Thank you.
Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to throw a little dig at Brookings, it's the best thing that's ever happened to Brookings is we get their employees here.
I like your blue shirt, Colin. It was a great game this weekend.
Yeah, it was.
It's been nice working for you all, by the way.
No, on a more serious note, it does concern me a little bit to see the park maintenance not make it at least one of them into the recommended positions, just because of the conversations we've had with our parks. And
I can speak to that. We wanted to wait, so the budgets got submitted right before former Director Kelly left. We wanted to wait until we had a new director on board who could really assess the operations. I'm sure that at some point we're going to have a recommendation for additional park maintenance employees. We wanted to assess the operations, assess where we're at with equipment, and also look at those part-time and temporary salaries and see if there were modifications that could be made. So it's a high priority. Again, just trying to balance the current needs with dollars we have available.
Councilman Tupper.
Maybe I could I address Chief Rowland on this first before I address City Manager Mack?
I would actually ask City Manager Mack if she thought, because it's her presentation.
Depends on your question.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll address the question. That's fine. I'm fine with either way. There was a request from the fire department for 2 firefighter EMTs that were not granted. I would, if you see fit for me to ask Chief Rowland what his thoughts were behind that and what your thoughts are behind that.
Sure. I mean, I can share my thoughts for why they didn't get included in this year, and Chief can provide more insight if you like. So when I look at all of departments across the city, some of them are functioning really well. Now, they may have desires to grow, desires to provide more service, but when you balance that against departments and divisions that are struggling, that's how I made my decisions. I think the fire department, while there certainly is a need in the future for those positions, and as the community continues to grow, it just didn't quite hit the mark compared with what we're trying to do in some of these other divisions and departments.
So just, can I ask Don a quick question? It could be a head
Sure.
shake. So, Don, you think you're sitting fine right now with everything, and it was more, how do I say this without, but just go ahead, you know what I'm trying to ask, I guess, so.
Well, I'll be honest with you. Sorry about that. When it comes to response times, as well as the actual number of calls that we are dealing with each year, yes, we are still on track with adding those 2 positions, which are 40-hour positions, would also help alleviate that daytime call struggle that we have. I understand budgets are difficult, and we'll just play the waiting game until it comes to fruition. So that's where I'm at with it.
I truly understand City Manager's Mac thoughts on that. There are, yeah, you are operating very well. You know me, when it comes to public safety, I'm going to ask questions.
Yeah.
That's my top concern. So, and I do understand your explanation. So, yeah, I mean, we wish we could hire everybody that was needed, but it's always a tough decision. I just wanted to kind of get Don's point on that. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other
Councilman
questions on
Danforth?
personnel?
I just have a comment in regards to the parks maintenance. You know, we have that study that's going to be coming. I think it's, in my opinion, probably a good idea to hold off on those like you have pending the receipt of that park evaluation and the recommendations coming out of that, because it's possible that would have an impact on what our needs are going to be, one way or the other, from what's suggested there. But I think that's probably a good thing.
Just for your information's sake, one parks maintenance position is all in with benefits is just a little over $71,000 that cost.
Any other questions, council? All right, back to you.
Okay. All right, so general fund personnel, here's some of the changes that you can see in the budget. So one request that we've budgeted for is to promote the payroll specialist position to an HR generalist. As you know, we are updating our financial software, and with that comes the electronic timesheets. A large amount of time that our payroll specialist spends right now is just processing timesheets. That work is going to be reduced pretty substantially, but we do have significant needs in HR from a training and compliance and onboarding perspective, all things that we have talked about through our strategic planning process. So we'd be recommending that that position be upgraded to an HR generalist position. Another request, so we have a finance records specialist that has had a lot of turnover, and one of the reasons we believe that there's turnover in that position is that there's not a lot of ownership with it. The title maybe isn't quite right, but the intent behind the upgrade to that position is to have someone whose main responsibility is the record keeping of the city. Now, that ultimately falls to the finance officer, just like the city manager is ultimately responsible for everything operationally, but we delegate those duties out. Adding an additional street maintenance worker, there was a request to increase the temporary salary wage for cemetery. That total dollar amount is about $37,000. You may remember that we moved the code enforcement officer position out of community development and into the police department, and we are requesting the addition of a forestry tech position. Questions on that? Okay. General fund revenues. Some significant changes this year. Property tax increase about $180,000. Sales and use tax increases 500,000 medical cannabis. We got an additional $75,000 coming our way. Bank franchise taxes, 15,000. Transfer in from the utilities is just a little over 1.4 million, which is an increase of $41,400. I did give you all a document that outlines the 23 and 24 proposed, or well, what they will be giving us for the transfer, as well as the costs related to street lighting and fire protection. We're transferring in from solid waste an additional $387,000, increasing ambulance charges by $30,000, and we anticipate a special assessments decrease in about $14,000.
Councilman Vilhauer has a
Thank you,
question.
Mayor. Manager Mack, on the sales and use tax increase, what percent are we budgeting as far as an increase?
For that one, what we did, it looks kind of high when you look at the actual increase over the budget, but as we continue to do that conservative, we took the last 3 years. We had 20 in there, which of course was COVID, and then we had 21 was really strong, and then what we're projecting from 22. So it's a 3-year average. It's about a 3% increase.
Okay, which to me has always been very conservative, which
Conservative.
I'm glad we're budgeting conservatively, but it is very conservative increase that we're looking at, that we're budgeting for. Thank you.
Okay. General fund operating budget, some changes that you'll see. The Encode 10 upgrade and addition of Content Manager. Again, that's the software and technology that we're looking to invest in to just continue to update our operations and provide more efficiencies, not just for our internal customers, but our external customers. Finance, the consultant services, that is our contract with Ehlers, which did not get executed in 2022, so we're carrying that over into 23. New software and cost of services for IT. Engineering, looking at a consultant for the 17th Avenue design. We're not looking to complete construction of that in 23, but to design the reconstruction of 17th Avenue. Looking at, again, these are some inflationary costs, fuel, both for police and ambulance, transferring out to Park and Rec at $250,000 and transferring out a decrease of $50,000 for the Upper Big Sioux. Questions on that?
I think we're good.
Mike, you look like you have a question. Or your eye's still hurting.
Well, for those that don't know, they used two-point font in the budget they gave us, so.
Just
it's
for
hard to
yours.
see.
Just for yours.
Yeah, I think that was strategic personally, but, so I've got a headache, but I'm trying to work on that. But what is the 17th Avenue design? What,
I will turn that over to our Public Works Director because I'm going to mess it up. But it's a redesign of that entire stretch of road south of 212.
Correct. So 17th Avenue runs from Highway 212 all the way south to the south bypass. It comes out right there at the entrance to the gun range. A majority of that street is a rural street section. It's no curb and gutter, but a ditch section adjacent to the pavement. The road is in pretty rough condition. It needs to be reconstructed in the near future. We're hoping we get one more year out of it. So what Justin's got programmed here after discussions with me and Rob as the street superintendent is this road being a priority to get it reconstructed. It's a pretty extensive stretch of roadway, so this would cover the design work simply because of the extensiveness of the design needed for this length of roadway to get that design complete. This would be again, converting a rural street section into an urban street section. So we'd be adding curb and gutter, storm sewer, and then any underground utility work associated with that. So it gets to that level of scope and magnitude and complexity that hiring a consultant for services like this would be imperative in order to get it accomplished in time.
Councilman Tupper, or Councilman Danforth, you have a follow-up?
so that, isn't that actually 17th Street?
It
I
is.
think that's the part that
Correct.
kind of threw me, 17th Avenue, I was trying to figure out where that was.
Correct,
I think it's
17th
17th Street.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. And that was Councilman Tupper's question, so we have that answered. All right.
Anything else?
Back to you, City Manager.
All right. General fund capital outlay, proposed purchases in '23. And we did talk about this a couple weeks ago at the CIP meeting, so this should not be terribly new information, but computers and equipment, 177,000, Public Works Department vehicles, 60,000, new patrol cars, fire department equipment, street division chip spreader, cemetery mower and foundation strips, in forestry, budgeting for a pickup and a grapple loader, and then in library, looking for more books.
Councilman Tupper.
Just a quick question, somebody's got to clarify, what's a foundation strips?
The cement that the monuments go on.
Okay.
Yes. Helps with mowing. Okay. All right, that's the general fund. Let's move on to Park and Rec. Almost 70% of this budget is personnel. A lot of people make our Park and Rec department run. Revenues, so a transfer in, $250,000 increase. We're also transferring in $200,000 from our Triple B fund. We expect golf cart rentals to increase, the aquatic admissions to increase, but we are also anticipating a decrease in zoo donations by about $44,000. Questions?
Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Why the last one? Why is that expected?
That's because of the zookeeper positions that we funded.
Go ahead.
That would be for the, I
Oh.
think there was a 3 years of commitment to support the zookeeper position, and that is final.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Councilman Beeler.
Thank you, Mayor. I get a question regarding Park and Rec, and maybe this, I don't know if this is the appropriate time for this question, but are we attempting to allocate more dollars towards any outsourcing programs? We started that pilot, I believe, last year for the mowing and for the, some of the weed activities, and we're looking at other areas to expand outsource opportunities for the city.
So we left in the $25,000 in each bucket that we did for the current fiscal year. Again, just wanted to wait until our Park and Rec director had an opportunity to really assess operations.
So there would be potential if we feel that that's been a successful program for us to expand that program and
Yes.
put more money towards that.
Correct.
That would make a difference, however, on what we do for hires, I would imagine, too, for part-time.
Yeah, it might. I mean, there's probably a good formula for what that looks like. I had a very brief conversation with Dusty on Friday, and he mentioned, well, personnel per acres, and so he knows what he's doing.
No,
He'll help guide us through that.
100% I agree,
Yeah.
having Dusty on board and for him to evaluate that, plus what we get back from the consulting firm that we're using
Right.
for Park and Rec. So, but just so we're mindful of that, because I really think that's important moving forward to try to expand on those programs. Thank you.
Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Manager Mack, I'd like to circle back to the transfer in the general fund increase, $250,000. Just for the public's information, what is that total transfer going to be? Is it approaching, what, $2.5 million roughly, or just under $2.5 million from the general fund?
$2,450,000.
Okay, so it's a sizable amount of our general fund expenditure goes to fund our Park and Rec departments. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and you're right. It is a large expenditure out of the general fund. It has only increased by the $250,000 though over the current fiscal year.
All right.
What's happening? Oh, there we go. Okay, Park and Rec personnel. A few changes. Some were made mid-year, so we just need to make sure that they're incorporated in the -- budget. But Ice Arena manager added. That number is all inclusive of all benefits and taxes associated with it. When we brought the wellness center superintendent on, we moved the facilities supervisor and the operations supervisor out of the wellness center and into the Park and Rec personnel. You also remember that we brought Levi on as a full-time city employee rather than contract employee, and our fiscal specialist too retired in July, and we have not filled that position. Okay. Moving on. Operating for Park and Rec, some things to be mindful of. Supervision, publication, and fees increase of just a little under 18,000. Our consultant and expert services at the golf course have decreased by 78,000. Again, we brought Levi on as an actual employee. Agriculture and horticulture supplies at the golf course, AgriLime, zoo, food and transport increases, and then replacing some wood chips throughout the park system. The supplies, the AgriLime, and the food and transport are largely related to inflation. Also at the zoo, we used to receive sizable donations in food. We would get food from local grocery stores and such, and that isn't happening anymore.
City Manager Mack, at the last slide, I don't know if you did that on purpose, but you had enlarged the slide so that it was easier to read. If you can do that again and make it permanent, I think it would be appreciated up here.
Well, I'm going to try, but if I mess it up, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Nope, that didn't work. Oh. Yeah, I don't. Just roll the mouse. Roll the mouse. No.
Maybe Trent or Nick could help us out. But
It's magic.
yeah.
Whoever whispered that in my ear is getting treats. Good job, Tim.
I think we
Good
all
job.
appreciate that.
'Kay.
Councilman Paulson has a question.
Whoa. I don't know what happened
Thank
here.
you, Mayor.
I don't know what page we're on. Good.
That's not the right one that I was gonna ask about, but, Amanda.
There we go.
Mac. The publications and rec fees had a significant increase over the previous year, and like 700% almost. So I'm just wondering why. Just seems to be a lot, and I don't know what goes into that.
Someone from Park and Rec is welcome to respond to that. We just got the request. Not a.
This is
not an exclamation.
Jeremy
Oh.
online. I know that Terry Kelly, when he put in the budget, he was looking at that for more marketing possibilities. That's about all I know about it.
Councilman, is that satisfactory for you?
Right.
Okay.
The voice.
All right.
Okay, capital outlay for Park and Rec. $10,000 for rec equipment, a golf course greens roller, control boxes, new lift chair at the aquatic center, water heater at the aquatic center. The zoo would like to replace a van, adding and replacing picnic tables throughout the park system, a mounted V-plow, new pickup, and tree removals and location within City Park. Okay. Prairie Lakes Wellness Center Fund. No significant changes in revenue. Teresa came on board, as you all know, right as budgets were being submitted. I think she's got some really great ideas for looking at revenue, how to potentially increase revenue that don't necessarily mean increasing rates. That may be that may come, but she and Dusty and I and Kristen will work through that in the coming months, and we'll probably bring an updated fee schedule to you all early in the new year. Personnel, again, we talked about this under Park and Rec, so we removed those 2 full-time positions out of the Wellness Center Fund and moved them to the Park and Rec Fund. And we also have increased the wage range for our part-time employees at the Wellness Center. They rely very heavily on part-time and temporary staff, and we need to continue to remain competitive with some of the other employers in town. Operating, some changes just in chemicals, drug, and lab supplies, largely related to the pool, and then building maintenance increase, about $8,000. Capital outlay, audio equipment, fitness equipment, and scoreboard controllers. And that's Park and Rec.
Thank you, Mayor. Kristen and Amanda, I had sent you an email earlier with a number of items on there I had questions on, and one of them was related to the Prairie Lakes Wellness Center financial performance. In looking at the numbers, it appears like well, at least in my understanding, this is the first time we will have had to have subsidized the wellness center, and I think your response was that we weren't subsidizing it. But again, just purely looking at the numbers, it looks like we are. Can you explain that to us, how that?
Yep. Okay, so if you look at the Wellness Center fund, that is a separate fund. It sits outside of the Park and Rec and the general fund. You're correct. Probably the first, I think it was about 3 years of operation, we were supplementing that with general fund transfers. Currently, you can see for the proposed budget that expenditures are over the projected revenues, but it does have a pretty healthy unrestricted fund balance. So I think in working with Teresa, our hope is that we can get that closer and then continue to contribute to that unrestricted fund balance. So then when they have some of those capital improvement items, that they can support the use of that themselves. So I would say that the Wellness Center is doing excellent. I will say that 2020 hit it hard. It did have to dip into that unrestricted. So I think now we're just kind of trying to bring that back up.
So I understand correctly, the unrestricted fund balance was one that was created from previous excesses. It was creation with its own revenue, is that correct?
That is correct.
So we're feeding off them.
Yep.
To support any variances.
Yep,
we have.
it has not had a general fund transfer, I think, let's see. Yeah, it's been at least probably 4 years. So it continues to try to maintain itself.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right. The Triple B Fund, we expect a decent increase in that, just about $100,000. We are looking to increase the allocation for our commitments to the event center. We've had numerous things come up over the last few months from a repair and maintenance perspective. I anticipate that those needs are going to continue to be there. So looking at just about $43,000 increase to that line item. As we talked about when we discussed the outside agency requests, increasing our contribution to CVB by $50,000, transferring out from the Triple B fund to Park and Rec $200,000, and then, while it's not a large amount, just something exciting as we finalize the new city logo and our rebranding, having some dollars available to actually do something with that. So, you know, putting that on vehicles, signage, things like that. Okay. All right. The Casualty Reserve Fund, no changes. And if you're wondering what that is, like I was, we set aside about $15,000 a year for equipment, vehicles, things that may not be covered under our insurance if there's any damage to them. So, okay. Oh.
Councilman Tupper?
City Manager Mack, does that just roll over every year, or is that transferred back into the?
It sits within the general fund, so anything that's not spent is then just goes back into the unrestricted.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
I got to catch up on my sheets here. Sorry. Capital Improvement Fund. Capital outlay. No personnel really in this, which is great. Okay, significant changes in revenues. Again, increasing the sales and use tax by about $500,000. Again, that's at 3%. Estimate STP funds, $25,000, and interest earned increase of about $50,000.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Manager Mack, would you explain what the STP funds are?
Yes, probably not going to do it very well. They're dollars we get from the state for street repairs and improvements. Okay. Expenditures. All right, street system improvements, and we have another slide that dives into those. 4.4 million, storm, sewer, and flood control projects, 2.3, recreational facility improvements, 2.3, industrial park and other, 300,000, debt service, about 5.4, and transfer out, 300,000. Street system improvements. So we're looking at budgeting 2.45 million for mill and overlay, 1.5 million for neighborhood street improvements, 200,000 for pavement rehab and patching, 160,000 in alley improvements, 75,000 for curb and gutter, and our annual bridge inspections for $10,000.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Thank you, Mayor. On the alley improvements, I know we had some dollars budgeted for 2022 for a couple alleys that we had talked about, and I don't think they got done this year. Is that being carried over, and is this in addition to that, or?
Go ahead.
So part of the process that happens with those capital improvement projects is once we finalize the year and we've kind of cleared out everything, we'll see what balances are left and what projects aren't complete. And then the council will review those capital carryovers in about April of the following year to carry over any additional funds that weren't spent in a project still ongoing.
Okay, so this is an addition to what was
Yes,
budgeted for
correct.
2022. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilman Danforth?
This says significant changes on there. So when we look at the, for example, the top line item, the mill and overlay of 2.45, how does that number compare to what we did for 2022? So what does that 2.45 million mean? That's how much in total?
So 2.45 is the total request. It's increasing by 450,000 over the current fiscal year.
So 2022 was 2 million. And,
Yeah.
and neighborhood road or street improvements, what is that exactly? Is that like we did on 12th Avenue this year, where we went in and where it was a significant project per se?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question or not. Keith can give you more detail if you need.
No, we're good.
Okay. Right. Recreation facility improvements. So fieldhouse improvements, 32,000. Boulevard trees and removal, I think we budget that annually, 30,000. Some improvements at Cook Complex. The bike trail expansion, 1.4 million. I do want to give that with a caveat that about 700,000 of that will be covered with state matching funds. Golf course projects, 100,000. Zoo improvements, 26,000. And then the Parks Master Plan for 700,000. The original budget that was submitted for Park and Rec facility improvements included about $3.8 million worth of projects. And before we could really determine what took precedent, so we decided the bike expansion because we had funding committed for that. We decided that we would just put dollars in there for implementation of the Parks Master Plan. So we're going to kick that process off here before the end of the year, after Dusty has a chance to really get a little more settled than week 2, work with Stockwell and start building that plan. And we have dollars available for implementation of it. We don't know what's going to come of that. We don't know if we're going to decide that it's pickleball, which I know has been a request, or if it's new basketball courts or new park equipment or pollinator gardens, things like that. So we wanted to have dollars available without tying them up for specific projects until we knew what we collectively determined the priorities were.
Councilman Tupper?
In the, Manager Mack, in the bike trail expansion, that doesn't cover any rehabilitation of any existing?
It does.
It does, that is
So
part of it.
the expansion covers new and repair and replacement. Now, there's a certain portion of that it has to be set aside for the trail
Yep.
around Compesca. You could feel free to interrupt me whenever you want.
So the 1.4 is essentially for the new projects this year. But what we do continue to do is we've always carried over those dollars as well that are being carried over. I think we sit at a balance now of about, it's almost 600,000 that's sitting there, and some of those dollars can be used for any repairs that are necessary. So I know that we had a few stretches that have issues, and that's where those dollars would
So there
come
is-
from. But this is truly the whole new, I think it's 3 phases for the 1.4.
So there is approximately 600,000 for
That's-
rehabilitation of existing.
That's
so-
currently sitting within the 212 budget.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Danforth?
Somewhere in the book here, it does show $100,000 for trail maintenance. Right? How does that differ from what we're talking about up here? To me, that, if I'm understanding correctly, that 1.4 million is the completion of the trail around the lake. It's not any maintenance. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
So the $100,000 that's in here truly is for maintenance. So we can't confuse those two numbers. It's 1.4 for the trail. We're budgeting 100,000 for maintenance.
Correct, but we have an additional 500,000 that's in the fund that's set aside for maintenance. So with the 100,000 we're budgeting, there's potentially $600,000 available to do trail maintenance and repair.
Then I'm gonna ask, then we're budgeting $100,000. The other $500,000 or $600,000 that's sitting there currently isn't being budgeted for that, correct?
Okay, I'm going to try to hopefully answer this correctly. So what we've done in the past is there has been a few years in our previous budgets that we haven't had an identified project for. And that has always been set aside each year. I think we've done around $250,000 with the anticipation of having upcoming full-on projects to complete the trail, but also setting aside dollars for maintenance. So when I say that there's about $500,000 to $600,000 that continuously is being carried over, that's to help support some of the projects, but it's also been set aside to help with that maintenance. So I guess to Councilman Tupper, I think the question was, is there any dollars currently in the budget? So for 2023, the 1.4 is solely for the new projects, but there is dollars within Fund 212 right now to help offset maintenance. So does that answer your question? No? What 100,000 are you talking about?
There's, in the budget, well, I don't know where it's at in here. The print is so small. There's a line item in here about, sorry about that, I had to throw that. There is a line item in here that lists $100,000 for bike trail maintenance. And not exactly sure, I didn't mark it, I guess, but so from a budgeting standpoint, the fact that we have money set aside, right, doesn't mean we're budgeting the use of that money. So if it's there if we want to use it, but if I look at the budget, we aren't budgeting the use of that money.
No, it's not within the current, but I also take whatever's budgeted and carried over has been essentially allocated previously, and that's part of that sits in that unrestricted. So as we continue to budget, I make sure that I don't use those dollars twice, essentially. Does that kind of make sense? I still can't find your 100,000.
I'll find it.
Okay.
We just gave Councilman Danforth his own budget. Smaller, different numbers.
I'm just gonna point out I can read it just fine.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Actually, no, I think I'll defer my question. I continue going through the capital improvement fund, but I might want to circle you back a few slides. So go ahead and I'll see if you answer my question on its own.
Okay. Industrial park and other infrastructure, again, we talked about this at the CIP meeting, budgeting about $245,000 for improvements at the Boys and Girls Club that are based on our contract, our responsibility, some HVAC needs, and then we did talk about the courtyard. This is not the new courtyard, it's the space in between the buildings that is tied to the systems that operate the buildings. And then our GIS implementation and mapping. That's the capital improvement fund, and I don't think I answered your question.
Oh, you're correct. Okay, go back and go back to keep going. Okay, right there. Do you want to talk just a minute about storm sewer and flood control projects? So that's a big number that we haven't seen in the past. Talk a little bit about that, Manager Mack.
Yes, let me get my bearings. Yeah. So a large portion of this is the flood mitigation study that we're currently undergoing with Corps of Engineers, and it's offset by federal and state funding. 900,000 is the cost of that.
That's the point I wanted to make, is that there's a big dollar in there for that as we continue to move forward, but a good chunk of that will be paid for. So I just want to make that point. So.
Yes. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on to the E911 fund. I will preface this and going forward, so we have E911, we have the library fines fund, wastewater, and the airport fund. There are items that are included in the slides, and we'll have a comprehensive slide at the end, that did not get included in the budget that you all have in front of you. So we'll need a motion from you, if you agree with these things, to add them into the budget so that it gets included in the ordinance when we bring that on November 7th. So and we'll talk about what those are. So E911, revenue changes, an increase about $45,000 in the PSAP funding, and county contributions of just under $63,000 in revenue. Personnel, no significant changes. Not requesting any new personnel.
City Manager Mack, for the sake of people who will be watching this, just whenever there's an acronym, just please explain what the acronym is.
Public Safety Answering Point. It's the tax on your cell phone bill.
Okay.
I had to ask that earlier today. So, okay. Operating, no significant changes, no significant requests. And then capital outlay, so this is a request that was made that just inadvertently got left out of the document. This is a recorder, not a reorder. Man, $28,000. Questions there? I hear it is nice. Okay. Library fines fund. No significant changes in revenue. No significant changes in operating. Capital outlay, these requests, again, got left off of the budget. So $2,300 for iPads, $2,400 for printers, and just under $10,000 for computers.
The mayor would like to point out that at least $25 of that library fines is coming from me.
Thank you for paying your fines, Mr. Mayor. All right. Okay, TIF funds. I am going to turn this over to our finance officer and let her visit about these. Just the revenues and expenditures are budgeted using the projected property tax revenues. These are all agreements that the council has entered into over the course of the last several years.
Okay, so didn't put all the detail in here as far as it is in the budget book, but to do some of these by slides, it's kind of over and over. So TIF 1 and 2 and 5 were all the ones that were city funded, where we actually did the improvements. Those are still currently paying back their loans. You did see that TIF 6 is not on there. That one hopefully will dissolve this year, and I'll be taking that one off the books. 7 through 17 are essentially all of our pretty current new ones. A majority of those are set up as what we would call a pay-as-you-go, where the developer is actually paying the cost of the improvements and the tax revenues are paying that developer back. The only one that doesn't have that is number 10, the lofts. That's actually paying back a loan to the city, $1.8 million. And then also TIF number 11, the marketplace. That's one that the city of Watertown did authorize entering into a bonding agreement for that project. So that one too is actually paying off debt. But the rest are pay as you go. So any revenues that are received are paid back to the developer for that life of the TIF. And I will say each development plan does put a cap on what that payback will be.
Councilman Tupper?
TIF 6, is that the original Willow Creek area?
TIF 6, I believe, ooh, of course I didn't write that one down.
We'll find out and let you know.
Yeah,
That's fine.
got excited that it wasn't on here, so then I just forgot.
Okay. Thank you. All right, the wastewater fund. So some changes in revenues. Collection increase about 181,000. Sewer consumption charges increase 108,000, and revenue for servicing the debt just under 600,000. Okay, personnel, no significant changes. Operating budget, again, anticipated fuel costs increasing about $10,000, decreasing our application of sludge costs for $23,000, and increasing our transfer out to the general fund of about $187,000. Capital outlay, sanitary sewer rehab, $330,000. The almost $36 million worth of treatment facility and sanitary collection improvements that we have discussed numerous times, that is being funded through ARPA dollars, state revolving loan funds, matching dollars from the state to our ARPA, and then you all did approve an increase to the user fees. Portable sampler, $6,000. New pumps, $32,000. Balancer, $7,500. Sampler, just under $14,000. And then the computers and the printers were left off for about $3,900.
Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. City Manager Mack, with that almost 36 million for the improvements, so we have to budget for that and pay for it up front, then we get reimbursed. Is that why?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions? Gosh, you guys are quiet. Solid waste fund. Refuse collection fees increase about $340,000, and commercial tipping fees increase of $928,000 on the revenue side. On the personnel, no significant changes. Operating budget, equipment maintenance increase about $28,000, motor fuel and lubricants $77,000, and transfer out to the general fund increase of $200,000.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Manager Mack, would you explain how is the transfer out to general fund? That's a percent of the revenue that is collected. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And for this fiscal year, we did a 10% transfer amount.
Okay, and that also applies for the wastewater as well,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yep. Capital outlay, a rehab of the old shop building, dumpsters and carts, machinery and equipment, about $465,000. The new scraper for $1.1 million, which has been in the CIP for quite some time, and some new recycling containers for about $34,000. Questions? Okay. That's solid waste. Moving on to the airport. So some changes on the revenue side, we anticipate increasing our state grants revenue by $100,000, decreasing on the FAA grant terminal just under $2 million, and decreasing on the DOT grant by about $77,000. And that's as those projects close out, they come off our books. No significant changes in personnel, not requesting any new positions. And the operating budget, some changes, looking at increasing the cleaning line item. We do have 3 times the square footage, if you remember our conversation this time last year. We just didn't quite know how to budget for cleaning and maintenance of the new facility until we were in there. And then increasing the utility cost, just given the the larger square footage. Questions on that? Okay. Capital outlay, some proposed purchases, and I do want to just reiterate that this comes to us by Helms and Associates, who are our consultants for the airport and work directly with the FAA. I don't know what I'm talking about today. These are funded through our entitlement and grant programs. So a new tractor, $65,000, a pickup, $42,500, a couple of pieces of multitasking equipment, designing of the ag spray taxiway, the ag spray environmental that needs to be done, and the new hangar taxiway driveway. The computers will be part of that amendment that we'll ask you to make at the end.
Councilman Tupper?
Multitasking equipment.
I knew someone was going to ask. Heath, Rob, yeah.
That is the snow removal equipment for the airport runways.
Good.
That seems kind of single-tasked.
Yeah.
Okay.
It does ice? Oh, okay. Well, I suppose it probably has to. De-icing runway.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Any questions? All right. That is the airport. So that brings us to our unrestricted cash balances. At the end of the day, if you all approve the budget as presented, that leaves us with a general fund unrestricted balance of just a little over $6.2 million and an unrestricted Fund 212 balance of just a little over $7 million. For the general fund balance, the comfort level there is that $4 to $5 million. So we're feeling comfortable there, and it's similar with Fund 212.
Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. Kristen, would it be too much trouble to just kind of give us a comparison to last year for these two figures? If it's a big problem, don't worry about it, but it'd be interesting to see. Thank you.
I don't know how close I can get. I will say it can change based off of the current budgeted years. What we try to do with the general fund is, according to GFOA standards, we are looking, which is Government Finance Officers Association, what we're trying to do is we look at 3 months of operating for that year, and we always want to leave about 3 months of operating. So that puts us around the 5. This year it's about 5.3 million of operating is for us to have that 3 month. I would say every time we've budgeted, as long as I've been here, we've always stuck to that. That's been our standard, and we've never really dipped below that on the general fund.
So it's pretty close to it.
It's very close, yep.
Thank you.
Councilman Vilhauer?
Thank you, Mayor. Just as a comment, this is the eighth budget hearing that I've sat through, and I know we always budget. I mean, this figure, the 6.2 million, that's assuming that our budget is exactly like we've got it presented. Well, we always budget very conservatively as to revenue, and we never spend all of our expenditures. Not to say that couldn't happen for 2023, but this is, like I say, probably going to be on this is on the low side of what we can actually probably expect to see by the end of 2023, if history is an indication of what's going to happen next year.
So another piece that we do use during the budgeting process is sometimes when you look at the year to year, it looks like, whoa, they're really off. Like if you look at our expenditures to revenue, what we do is we use a 5-year average. To Councilman Vilhauer's point, I would say that we always conservatively budget our revenues and kind of over anticipate what our expenditures will be. And that's kind of what always gives us that ability to leave a pretty healthy unrestricted fund balance. So this is, I think, when we look at the general fund, I would say even with our projected increases for wages and insurance and inflation, I think this leaves the city comfortable with that unrestricted.
All right, thanks.
Okay. These are those expenditures that we talked about that just got missed and didn't get added into the document that was sent. So after your discussion, and if you agree with these, we would just ask that you take a motion to approve the additional expenditures, and we'll get them added into the document for the first reading of the ordinance on November 7th. And that is the 2023 budget as presented. Just for this slide.
Yeah, we have a few questions.
Yep.
We'll go Councilman Danforth and Councilman Paulson.
Mayor, I've got like 3, if I can. When we had last met, there was a question that I had in regards to the funding, not the general funding, but the additional funding for the Boys and Girls Club, and you were going to do some evaluation of that.
Yes. So if we go back to that slide, well, it's about 245,000. So it is for HVAC, which, based on our contract, is part of our obligation. And the courtyard, like I said, is not the new courtyard that they built. It's called the courtyard. It's the space in between the existing buildings that is tied to the systems that run the buildings. So it's existing.
So
it's
the
not new.
rooftop units are on the old or original
Yes.
portions of the building, and the
Yes.
whole courtyard thing I don't understand, but I'm gonna trust that we got that one under control. As far as our street lights, that's always been one.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know what percent of our street lights has been converted to LED? Have we gotten that information from the utilities and what that cost per street light is and what the ROI is?
We have not, but to be fair, we haven't requested that, so we
Yeah,
can ask
We really
that.
should do that. I mean, at some point in time, we have to invest in efficiency, and that's where that would come in. So that should be something that I think we take a look at. The other suggestion that I would have is we have the auditorium and the field house together in the budget. I would like to see them separated, because there's going to come a time when we need to more clearly understand our costs of operating the auditorium, and that building is coming into question at times. And I think if we have the aud and the field house together, it just kind of creates some unclear performance aspects of each building. So it'd be good, I think, if we had them separate, and primarily due to the fact that the aud does come into question, and it gives us better information.
I just want to make sure that I got your question about the street lights correct. So you want to know how many lights have been converted to LED?
Yeah, what
and how
percentage
many
have been converted?
left?
What's the
Okay.
cost per street light to
Okay.
convert it? And what's the return on investment on that based, I suppose, on
Okay.
current rates? Because isn't part of our transfer back and forth the cost of the maintenance of and the expenditure of the lights?
Yes, it is. So they transfer to us. This year will be 1.4 million, and we will budget 526,000 for streetlights and another almost 300,000 for hydrants.
Right. So my point is it's $500,000 that we're paying
Mm-hmm.
to have the streetlights on, and I'm just curious as to where are we at with the conversion to LED and what that actually would save us. Be an interesting number to look at, and I'm sure they have those numbers. So
We'll get it.
Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Amanda, is there more to come?
Nope, this is
Okay,
it for the
okay.
presentation.
Perfect. Okay, so I do have a question on the housing program that you and I have discussed several times.
Yes. So Councilman Paulson and I have had numerous conversations about a potential housing incentive program. Rather than including specific dollars for that, because we don't know what the program looks like, Kristen and I spoke a little bit about this. We thought it would be better to come to the council if a program is established and do a budget amendment at that time. Because we don't know, 50,000 might be enough, or maybe it's 100,000, depending on who would be willing to partner. So that's why it's not specifically called out in there.
Okay. And then, since he was talking about streetlights, I'm gonna hit on this again for the second year in a row, and I know the utilities are not gonna be happy about it, but personally, I don't care. I feel like this is a double tax on our city, on the taxpayers of this community, and this document doesn't mean anything to me other than we are going backwards as a city as far as our tax dollars go, because the hydrants and lights should already be paid for and accounted for within our fees as users, as an entire taxpayer base. I don't agree with this transfer in, transfer out. It complicates things. I think it's messy. I think they're getting away with a lot here, and it really frustrates me every time it comes up, because Our taxpayers are paying this cost multiple times, and it is very frustrating to me. Because I'm going to bring up too, if you drive down several roads, but the prime example is 2nd Street Northwest, which happens to be in my ward. That entire road from 14th all the way to 10th is a disaster, and it is, every part of it is because of a utility trench. So who bears that cost? We do. Our engineering department is responsible, and our street department is responsible for maintenance and overlaying that, and they're not getting charged for that, and that's very frustrating to me. And that's, I'm going to keep hitting on this every year. And whether I'm here next year or not, I'll come and talk. I'll become part of the public then. But this needs to stop. We need to figure out something different, because I'm getting really sick of looking at these numbers and then driving around our community and seeing the roads that are destroyed because the trenches aren't properly put back in place, and them doing what we want. Because we pay for the lights up front. Like on the Highway 212 project, we're paying for those lights up front. And then we have to get charged for maintenance and lighting it constantly when we should already be paying for that. I just disagree with it. And I'm willing to fight that fight. So I'm just letting you guys know that's where I sit. It's frustrating. So I don't know if there's another solution we can come up with. I know that there's an agreement, or however it was set up back how many ever years ago. It's time to find a new solution for this, because it's not working for the current day situation. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
We're going to go down the row here. Councilman Tupper, then Councilman Bueller, then Councilman Villauer. Councilman Tupper?
Just to touch on the cost decrease in lighting LEDs, I don't think Mike was here when they handed that out. There's an actual decrease this year of $2,339 for switching some of them to LEDs. And can I respond to Councilman Paulson's? I don't totally disagree with you, Colin. But $1,446,000 is going to come out of somebody's pocket. Whether it's coming out of the taxpayer's pocket either way. Whether we add it onto our monthly bill or we add it into this. I've never liked this neither, but it's going to get paid one way or the other. I mean, utilities aren't going to throw up street lights for us and pay to light the city without getting some kind of reimbursement. So they either add it on to everybody's monthly bill as a percentage or do it this way. So,
Mayor,
City Manager
just
Mack?
to provide a little bit of response to Councilman Paulson, we implement policies set by the council. So if there is a discussion that the council would like to have as it relates to the utilities, we'd be happy to facilitate that. But ultimately, it's your decision on what that looks like. As it specifically relates to the street cuts and trenches, last year we did improve that ordinance to not allow for that within so many years of new streets, working with the utility to have better communication and coordination on their projects and ours. So I think your point is duly noted. We're working to improve that so that they can get their work done and we get our work done, but it's certainly not perfect yet.
Councilman Villauer?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment. It wasn't one of your slides, Manager Mack, but I know it is in our budget book. We as taxpayers to celebrate. We paid off our general obligation bond on the event center in 2022, so taxpayers will not see that on their property tax notices going forward.
That is correct. That bond is being paid off at the end of this year, so that one is complete and off of the tax roll. So,
Thank you much. Any further comments, Councilman Bueller?
Thank you, Mayor. To Colin's point, you might want to consider that for discussion if and when we have strategic planning for the council. That might be a good bullet point to bring forward.
Okay.
I will allow a response to that before I go to Councilman Tupper. Councilman Paulson?
Okay, thank you. Just one note on that too, is right now it's a direct general fund hit. And if we did it like we should, where it's through the rates itself, it's not coming out of our general fund. And that's where I think, I just, how we're doing it now just doesn't, I don't think is appropriate, but that's all I'll say.
Councilman Tupper?
Is the reason we're paying off the rest of the event center GO bond because you paid your $25 fee at the library, or?
Any further comments, council? Okay, it says here that that this is a public hearing, so I will declare a public hearing now. Is there anyone here or online would like to comment on this? Okay, I will close the public hearing. There's no call for action in the agenda item, but do we want to adopt this?
So you don't actually adopt this. You'll adopt the budget ordinance on the 7th, but we would, just for our own record keeping, like a motion. I'll pull up that page here. No, it's on there. I know, but it's on here. See, so we would appreciate a motion to approve these additional expenditures as presented, so that we can include them in the ordinance that you all will see on the 7th.
Chair will take that motion up. Motion made by Councilman Bueller, seconded by Councilman Tupper. Any conversation on this, council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the additional expenditures. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries.
Whoa. This is epic timing, Dan. Good job.
And it's done.
So this will be back at the November 7th council meeting?
Yeah, the first reading of the budget ordinance will be.
Thank you very much. 10-minute break. Councilman Villar?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to, Manager Mack, you thanked the finance office as well as departments, but I want to extend my thank you as well. I know an awful lot of work goes into getting this to us at this point, and so I want to thank everyone. We got a room full of people that were involved in that process, so I want to thank everybody that had a hand in this.
Thank you.
Councilman Bueller?
Yeah, and I think also importantly, we need to thank City Manager Mack for the nice snacks and charcuterie boards she put
It was like a
together
shock and awe
at
thing,
her
right? Like if you're
house.
impressed by the food, maybe you'll be.
I had to take photos. I got a little misty just looking at it. And, but I'd like to thank you. That was very nice
You're
of you to do that.
welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would just like to also say thank you to everyone in the room, everyone who works for the city of Watertown. Make this a great city. I think best place to live that I could think of. And I know that the presentation today was smooth, but I know that the negotiations behind it were probably not. So I want to thank everyone for going through that process and coming to the city with a wonderful budget and rosy outlook for 2023 and for the future of Watertown.
Thank you, Mayor.
I will now recess. I know that probably quite a few people are probably going to want to leave before we go to our CIP discussion. So I'm going to call a 10-minute recess, and by 10 minutes, I mean 10 minutes. So see you back here at that moment. So thank you very much. We're at ease for 10 minutes. Agenda item B is a presentation, review, public input, and council approval of the proposed capital improvement plan. We'll return to our city manager, Amanda Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. This is not a new document for all of you, and I'm sorry that I don't have a very fancy presentation for this, but we'll get through it. You all just gave us the nod on the 2023 capital improvement request, so we will skip right over that and move, unless you have questions, and move to the 2024 through 28, the actual CIP. We brought this to you a couple of weeks ago. You deferred action. You wanted some time to look at it and come with any questions you might have. Some of them were related to the Boys and Girls Club, which we answered in the during the budget hearing. One question was, have we included any dollars for the new ice arena in the CIP for overruns, things like that? The answer is no, we have not. On the November 7th agenda, we'll have Dick Strasberg here to give an update on the ice arena, and he'll talk about that specifically, about how to potentially prepare for things that are going to come up that we may not be aware of with the new arena. And looking back through my notes, we had a brief conversation about a city-owned asphalt plant. I don't have any new information for you on that in the last couple of weeks. It's certainly worth a longer conversation. Some questions about a dumping station outside of City Park. I think that will come as we build our master park plan and look through that. Oh, gosh. And those are the questions that I had written down that you all had. Not sure how you'd like to proceed. Just ask questions. If you'd like me to go through year by year, I certainly can. You just need to tell me what you want.
I think we had a pretty thorough hearing the last time. And I think unless the council has specific questions, I mean, I will open it up for council comments and questions, but I don't think that you need to go through the entire thing again.
Okay.
By any stretch. Councilman Villauer?
I would just make the recommendation, take a motion on it and vote on it. I mean, we went through it pretty thoroughly, subject to the questions that Manager Mack has answered, so I'm ready to take action on it.
Okay, there is a question. But actually, it is appropriate that we take a motion and then open it up for debate. So there was a motion made to adopt the CIP plan by Councilman Villauer, second by Councilman Tupper, and now questions and comments. Councilman Danforth.
Thank you. Amanda and Kristen, one of the things that I had sent you today is there is nothing that I'm aware of in the plan as it relates to the current Moss Ice Arena. We know that in 2023 sometime, late 2023, that the new facility is scheduled to be open. So really the question is what is going to happen to that building? When's it going to happen? What's it going to cost? Historically, that has been discussed to turn into an additional field house. And I know several years ago when I was last on the council, there were some numbers thrown out for that. But we know that's coming, and other than we're mothballing that building for, 5 years beyond, something should go in there somewhere because we know we're going to be doing something. So it seems like we're missing there.
Yes. So we did not include anything in the plan for the current ice arena, largely because we didn't know what the will of the council was on how you wanted to move forward with that. As Councilman Danforth said, the conversation has largely been centered around additional field house space, but perhaps there are other more better suited uses for that, and that'll be on the docket for 2023 to vet out and bring a recommendation on what to do with that, which will include a financial recommendation.
I do also think that as we look at the long-term capital plan, I'm hopeful that we are going to have some level of council strategic planning the 10,000-foot vision and planning process, which without question may change where we sit on some of these things. So, I think it's where we stand today. It looks reasonable. Where we're at the end of the year or before the next budget, that's a whole nother thing. And I do think that, excuse me, to a large extent, the vision and highest level planning of the council should reflect that. So there obviously would be changes probably to that based on that outcome.
Finance Officer, Bob Zine.
Thank you, Mayor. So the one piece that I will say, I do agree with Councilman Danforth that there's some of our bigger projects that probably will change throughout the years. The nice thing with this current plan, though, is in the general fund and the capital improvement fund, a couple of those big pieces of equipment, which we have kind of agreed to essentially in this, I am starting to set aside those capital dollars for. So within the budget that was just approved, along with it was some of those bigger street department pieces of equipment, so I'm slowly setting aside that cash for. So those will probably stay relevant, but some of those bigger projects will change. And that's kind of how we see it happen, but we do like to keep the equipment consistent just so that when those years come, we can fund them. So, thank you.
Councilman Beeler.
Thank you, Mayor. To Councilman Danforth's point, I think it would benefit us, and probably already in the plan, to look at what recommendations come down the pipe. I don't know if that's in the purview or the scope of work for Stockwell to look at. If it isn't, it maybe should be as a part of the Park and Rec evaluation. That's something we may want to consider if that's not a part of that. As to
If what is not a part? Sorry, I'm not tracking.
maybe I didn't communicate that very well. To his point in regards to the ice arena.
Okay.
The Moss.
Got it.
It makes sense to me that we look at any possible suggestions that they may have for us. And I don't know if that's in the scope of work for what we're asking them to do, and also for our new Park and Rec superintendent to have an opportunity to look into. So I think those two things would make a big difference. And then when it does come to the council level for some strategic planning, then we can make some decisions.
To your point about scope of work with Stockwell, Dusty and I just had a very brief conversation last week, and he'd like to dive into the scope and make sure that it's appropriate for what we're trying to accomplish. If not, we may come back and ask for an amendment to that contract. I'm not sure what that would look like, but we'll make sure to have that conversation with Stockwell about what's included and what's not.
Councilman Tupper.
Excuse me. I know when we looked at this a few weeks ago, there was a question that arose on some of this equipment purchases, and you say some of that money is being set aside now. And I think probably Mike or Rob could probably answer this. Has anybody looked into leasing some of this equipment, and where do we stand on that compared to purchase?
Yeah. So we've just started that research. Rob Bainan, our street superintendent, did send Heath and I some information on Friday, I believe it was. So we're starting to gather it, and we'll have to vet it and compare what that versus purchasing. Some of it may be more advantageous to lease. Some of it probably works better for us to own. We just don't know what that looks like yet.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments, council? It does say here public input, so I'll open it up for anybody from the public who would like to comment upon this. Hearing no one come forward, the motion is to approve the capital improvement plan. All those in favor will please say aye. Aye. Any opposed say nay. Motion carries. Is there any old business? Any new business? Liaison member reports? Any announcements? City Manager Mack?
Sorry, I do have an announcement. I did send you all, as well as all of the employees, an email this afternoon from our fire department on Saturday. They are looking for some volunteers and help with installing smoke detectors. They haven't done this in a couple of years because of COVID, but it certainly is a need within the community. If you're interested in volunteering, you can go to the main station, station number 1, right over here at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning. It should just take a couple of hours. But so far, I think they only have about 4 people signed up. So not going to get very far with 4 people. So if you're able, we hope you'll join us.
Steve, do you think you could help get that news out? You, yeah. No, I believe you could reach a lot of people, possibly get some volunteers. Okay. It would be much appreciated. Any further announcements? Councilman Tupper?
Just wanted to touch base on that email you sent out, Amanda, and I'm not able to do it this weekend because I do have some out-of-town guests coming, but I sat in, or I shouldn't say sat in, I did it probably 5-6 years ago. It is very rewarding to know that you're going out there helping some people, and also in that email, you talked about a lot of this is going to be targeted toward trailer houses. There's nothing goes up any faster. I mean, in the nose, and we all read about tragedies of people that did not have fire detectors, and I mean, there's even some stories around town that some that did save some, and it was some of the ones that we use in our United Way speeches of some of the people that we've helped save by helping support that program. So it is very important. Like I say, if you can go out and help save one life, more power to you, and hopefully we can get enough people to go out and help them.
Thank you very much. Any further announcements? Hearing none, we have no need to go into executive session today. Therefore, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Councilman Bueller, seconded by Councilman Tupper. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Good night and God bless you, Watertown.